They threw my suitcase on the lawn and called me trash. His mother said I wasn't good enough to breathe their air, so I became exactly what they called me, a garbage collector. But when that DNA test came back and the lawyers showed up at their door, their faces went white. Before we get into this story, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't believe how this turns out, and you don't want to miss what happens when karma comes knocking. Trust me, this one will have you screaming at your screen. Now, let me tell you how I went from picking up trash to picking up $1 billion inheritance. My name is Simone, and 3 years ago, I thought I had found my happily ever after. I met Julian Bennett at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was a teacher, running late, and I accidentally spilled my coffee all over his expensive suit. He laughed it off, bought me another coffee, and we talked for 2 hours straight. He was charming, funny, and he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. He came from money, old money, but he never made me feel less than. At least, not in the beginning. We got married within a year. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I ignored. His family was cold at our wedding. His mother Beverly barely smiled in the photos. His father Gerald shook my hand like he was touching something dirty. His sister Ashley rolled her eyes every time I spoke. But I was in love, and Julian promised me that they would warm up to me eventually. He said they just needed time to get to know me. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. After the wedding, we moved into the Bennett family mansion. It was this huge estate with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place you see in magazines. I thought living there would be temporary, just until we found our own place. But months turned into a year, and Julian always had an excuse for why we couldn't move out yet. His father needed help with the business. His mother wasn't feeling well. There was always something. Living with Beverly was like walking on eggshells every single day. She criticized everything about me. My clothes weren't elegant enough. My hair was too natural, too ethnic. She said my cooking wasn't up to their standards, even though I had learned to make all of Julian's favorite meals. She made comments about my background constantly. I grew up middle class, and to her, that meant I was beneath them. She would say things like, "You're not one of us, dear," with this fake sweet smile that never reached her eyes. And Julian, he never defended me, not once. He would just tell me to ignore her, to try harder, to be patient. I tried everything to make them like me. I took cooking classes to learn fancy French cuisine. I changed my wardrobe completely. I even straightened my hair because Beverly made a comment about it looking unprofessional. But nothing I did was ever good enough. I was slowly losing myself, becoming smaller and quieter, trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. Then came our second anniversary. Julian said we were having a special dinner with the family. I was excited because I thought maybe finally things were getting better. I wore a beautiful dress, did my makeup perfectly, and walked into that dining room with hope in my heart. That hope died the moment I saw Beverly's face. She stood up, smiled that cruel smile of hers, and said, "Simone, we need to talk about your future." I looked at Julian, confused, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Beverly continued, "This marriage was a mistake. Julian is going to marry someone more suitable to our family's standing. The papers have already been prepared." She slid divorce documents across the table to me, like she was serving dessert. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Julian, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to tell his mother she was crazy. But he just sat there, staring at his plate. "Julian," I whispered. He finally looked at me, and I saw nothing in his eyes. No love, no regret, nothing. Beverly leaned forward and said, "You were just a phase, dear. Now it's time for you to leave. Tonight." That same night, they threw me out. Gerald literally threw my suitcase onto the front lawn. I stood there in the dark, watching the door close behind me, and I realized I had nothing. I had quit my teaching job after we got married because Beverly said a Bennett wife didn't need to work. I had no income, no savings of my own. Julian had blocked my number before I even made it to my car. My family had passed away years ago in an accident. I had no one to call, nowhere to go. I slept in my car that first night, crying until I had no tears left. The next morning, I tried to access our joint bank account. Frozen. Julian's lawyers had already moved faster than I could think. I spent 3 nights sleeping in my car, parked in different places so no one would notice me. I was terrified, hungry, and completely alone. I had never felt so worthless in my entire life. I applied for jobs everywhere: retail stores, restaurants, cleaning services, anywhere that would take me. But I started noticing a pattern. Every time I made it to the interview stage, I would suddenly get rejected. It took me a week to realize what was happening. The Bennetts had blacklisted me in their social circles, and those circles were wider than I thought. They made sure no one would hire me. Finally, I got a call back from a place that didn't care about my references or my background. The sanitation department. They needed trash collectors, and the job started immediately. The irony wasn't lost on me. Beverly had called me trash, and now I was literally collecting it. But I took the job because I had no choice. It was honest work, and it paid enough for me to rent a tiny studio apartment and buy food. I started at 4 in the morning, rain or shine. The work was brutal: lifting heavy bags, working with the smell, dealing with people's disgust when they saw me. But I showed up every single day. I wasn't going to let them break me completely. 3 months into the job, my route changed. They assigned me to Maple Street, the wealthy neighborhood, the neighborhood where the Bennett mansion was located. I remember the first time I saw the house again. My hands were shaking as I lifted the trash bins from their perfectly manicured curb. I was praying no one would see me, but of course, someone did. Ashley came outside, and when she saw me, her face lit up with pure joy. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. I heard her laughing as she walked back inside. Within an hour, the photos were all over social media. "Look who's picking up our garbage now." The post went viral in their social circles. People I used to have dinner with were commenting, laughing, sharing. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't. I had to finish my route. I had to survive. Then Beverly came outside. She stood on her perfect porch, in her perfect outfit, and looked down at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. "This is where you belong, Simone," she said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I always knew you would end up exactly where you deserved to be." I didn't respond. I just loaded the last bag onto the truck and drove away. What else could I do? 6 months passed. 6 months of waking up before dawn, of aching muscles and dirty uniforms, of eating cheap meals and living in a place barely bigger than a closet. But I survived. I survived because I refused to give up, even when every part of me wanted to. Then one day, everything changed. I was on my route, and a man in an expensive suit approached me. He looked so out of place, standing next to a garbage truck, that I thought maybe he was lost. "Are you Simone Marie Johnson?" he asked. My first thought was that the Bennetts had sent him to harass me. I took a step back. "Who's asking?" He pulled out a business card. "My name is Leonard Price. I'm an attorney from New York, and I need to speak with you about your birth parents." My birth parents. I was adopted when I was 2 years old. I had always known that, but I never had any information about my biological family. The adoption records were sealed, and I had made peace with never knowing where I came from. "What about them?" I asked, suspicious. Leonard looked around at the street, at my uniform, at the garbage truck. "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private. This is a very sensitive matter." We ended up at a cheap diner a few blocks away. I was still in my work uniform, smelling like trash, and he was in a $1,000 suit, but he didn't seem to care. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Your birth mother's name was Diana Harrington," he began. My heart started pounding. "She was a very successful businesswoman in the hotel industry. She had you when she was 19 years old, and her parents forced her to give you up for adoption. She spent the next 26 years searching for you." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "Where is she now?" Leonard's expression softened. "She passed away 4 months ago from a terminal illness. But before she died, she found you. She left everything to you: her hotels, her real estate, her investments, everything. Your mother was worth approximately $2.3 billion, Simone. And now it all belongs to you. I laughed. I actually laughed because it was too absurd to be real. This is a joke, right? The Bennetts put you up to this. But Leonard pulled out photographs. Photos of a woman who looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same smile, same everything. We'll need to do a DNA test to make it official, he said. But I have no doubt you're her daughter. Diana was certain when she saw your photo. The DNA test took 2 weeks. Leonard offered to give me money immediately, to set me up in a hotel, to get me out of that apartment and away from the garbage truck. But I refused. If this was real, I could wait. I had survived 6 months of hell. I could survive 2 more weeks. And if it wasn't real, I didn't want to get my hopes up, only to have them crushed again. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I kept working, kept showing up at 4 in the morning, kept collecting trash from the Bennett mansion. But something inside me had shifted. I had hope again. Not hope that I would have money, but hope that somewhere out there, I had a mother who loved me enough to search for me for 26 years. When the results came back, I was at work. Leonard called me, and I had to pull the truck over because my hands were shaking so badly. It's a 99.9% match, he said. Congratulations, Miss Harrington. You're a billionaire. I broke down crying right there on the side of the road. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, I knew that someone had wanted me. My birth mother had loved me. She had searched for me. She had thought about me every single day, and even though I would never get to meet her, knowing that she existed, that she cared, that was worth more than any amount of money. Leonard explained everything over the next few days. Diana had built an empire, 47 hotels across the country, luxury properties, commercial real estate. Harrington Hotels International was one of the most respected names in the industry, and now I was the CEO. The board of directors was waiting to meet me. There were decisions to be made, contracts to review, a whole world I knew nothing about. I spent 2 weeks learning everything I could. I met with lawyers, financial advisors, and board members. I studied business management like my life depended on it. And during one of those meetings, I discovered something interesting. Bennett Construction had a contract with Harrington Hotels, a $50 million contract for a major renovation project, and that contract was up for renewal in 1 month. I could have let it go. I could have just canceled the contract and moved on with my life. But I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know exactly what they had thrown away. Not for revenge, but for justice. For every time Beverly made me feel small. For every time Julian stayed silent. For every person who laughed at those photos of me collecting their trash. I got a complete makeover, not to impress them, but to step into my new role. Designer clothes that actually fit my body and my style. I got my natural hair done beautifully. I learned to carry myself with the confidence I should have always had. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I recognized, the woman I was, before I let them dim my light. The day of the contract meeting arrived. Bennett Construction sent their representatives to the Harrington Hotel's conference room. Gerald and Julian came personally because this was a huge contract, one their company desperately needed. They walked into that boardroom expecting to meet with an old board member they had worked with before. Instead, they found me sitting at the head of the table. Julian's face went completely white. Gerald looked like he had seen a ghost. I smiled politely and said, "Hello, Gerald. Hello, Julian. Please, have a seat. Shall we discuss business?" Julian tried to speak, but no words came out. They sat down slowly, still staring at me like I wasn't real. I opened the contract file and began reviewing their work professionally, calmly, like I had been doing this my entire life. "Your work quality has been acceptable," I said, looking at the numbers. "However, I've discovered several billing irregularities, overcharges, duplicate invoices, charges for materials that were never used." Gerald tried to interrupt, tried to explain, but I held up my hand. "Mr. Bennett, I'm speaking." The room went silent. Julian leaned forward, trying to turn on the charm that had worked on me 3 years ago. Sim, we can explain all of this. There must be some misunderstanding. It's Miss Harrington, I corrected him. And no, you can't explain. I've had my team audit every single invoice from the past 2 years. The evidence is very clear. I closed the folder and looked directly at both of them. The contract is terminated, effective immediately. We'll be moving forward with a different construction company. Gerald's face turned red. You can't do this. We have a legally binding agreement. I smiled. Actually, the renewal clause requires both parties to agree to continue. I'm choosing not to continue. Your company will receive payment for work completed up to this point, minus the amounts you fraudulently overbilled. Of course, my lawyers will be in touch. Gerald stood up, slamming his hands on the table. We'll sue you for everything you have. I remained calm. Please do. My lawyers are excellent, and I'm sure the industry would love to hear about your billing practices. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Julian tried one more time. We were married. That has to mean something. You can't just... I cut him off. It did mean something. Until you threw me away like garbage. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Gerald and Julian were walked out of my building, out of my company, out of my life. I watched them leave, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, nothing. They were simply irrelevant to me now. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more thing to do. I drove to the Bennett mansion one last time, but not in a garbage truck. I arrived in a chauffeur-driven Mercedes, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. Beverly answered the door, and when she saw me, her expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something that might have been fear. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I simply looked at her and said, "You were right, Beverly. I wasn't one of you." She opened her mouth to respond, but I continued. Thank God for that. Then I walked away, got back in my car, and never looked back. 6 months have passed since that day. Harrington Hotels is thriving under my leadership. I started a scholarship fund for adopted children who want to go to college. I created job training programs for people experiencing homelessness because I know what it's like to have nothing. I hired 3 people from my former sanitation crew and gave them executive positions in the company. They were good people who treated me with respect when I had nothing, and now I could give them opportunities they deserved. Julian has tried to contact me multiple times. Every call goes to voicemail. Every email gets deleted. Bennett Construction filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago. The contract they lost with us was apparently the one keeping them afloat. Ashley's social media post about me collecting trash resurfaced when my transformation story went viral. But instead of embarrassing me, it inspired thousands of people who are struggling to keep going. I use my platform now to talk about resilience, about knowing your worth, about how people's opinions of you don't define who you are. They tried to break me by calling me trash. Instead, they freed me to become who I was always meant to be. Not because of the money, but because hitting rock bottom taught me that I was stronger than I ever knew. So that's my story. From the mansion, to the garbage truck, to the boardroom. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button and subscribe because I post new stories every week. Drop a comment below telling me, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have given them a second chance, or would you have walked away like I did? Also, if you've ever been underestimated or counted out, drop a in the comments. Remember, they can throw you out, but they can't stop you from rising. I'll see you in the next video.